Hello, I wanted to make a video to kind of show everybody how to start with these ECRs or extended constructed responses. I've shared some resources and posted, some pictures of how I do this in my classroom on my Facebook page, Teaching RLA with Carlin Liborio. But I wanted to make a video to kind of go over just how do you start? How do you get this going in your classroom? And I'm hoping that this will help all the teachers out there, especially in Texas. But this could also be for other states. There is actually 39 states that are writing these evidence-based essays. So hopefully, these tips can help teachers out there, which will help a lot of students. Is my goal. Okay, so my first tip, before you even start with ECRs, is you need to start with short constructed responses. Do those until your students are able to do those, and then you can move in to the extended constructed response. Um, I got this from the TEKS, which are the Texas, basically the standards. So this graphic is really neat because it shows you how from kindergarten all the way to fifth grade and beyond, it all has the same learning objective to use text evidence to support a response. And so why we're doing this is to basically create stronger readers and writers. So since they're having to not just circle a multiple choice answer, they're going to actually be writing about what they're reading. Okay, so what I use to teach short constructed response, and if you're new to this, short constructed response, from what I've seen that TEA has released, is usually a question that's going to be just about a paragraph or a section of the passage. It has not been about the whole passage. So keep that in mind when you are creating SCRs. I'm going to show you some examples in a minute that I found from TEA, and I will share those with you. I also have some that I created that are on some of my pages that I'll show you at the end. Okay, so this is the planner that I started off at the very beginning of the year. Um, and you can modify this if you're teaching third grade, you could make the lines bigger. But what I do is I print two to a page. So first, they restate and answer the question. So we spend a lot of time asking them questions like, "What is your favorite color?" My favorite color is. So later, it's going to become, they're going to end up writing more complex introductions. But for now, at the very beginning, they just need to be able to restate and answer the question, because if they don't have the answer or it's not clear, they will not get the point. So I would practice making that very clear. I teach them to either underline or highlight or circle the words in the question that they're going to copy. For example, they would circle word use to describe Dan, and then that would help them. Basically, they would copy all of this. And then their sentence would be, a word to use to describe Dan would be kind. The text states Dan stopped playing to ask a boy if he wanted to play. And then using the colors is another thing that really helps the students. You can stick to a specific color, or you can just let them decide the color. And basically, I teach them to do the RA one color or the R one color. So these are the words. The purple, I guess, is what the student used to restate. The answer to the question is kind. So the student did that a different color. And then the yellow is what they used for the text evidence. So there may be one of these or two of these on the STAAR test. It just depends because it's not very clear on the blueprint it says 2-point questions. So that could also be multi-select, that could be part A, part B, but we're still going to teach these because this is a great stepping stone into ECR. So I would spend a few weeks on this if you haven't already. How this is going to be graded is 2 points if it is the correct answer and it has relevant text evidence. 1 point if it has the correct answer, but the evidence is not relevant or it's the wrong text evidence. 0 is if they did not answer the question correctly and they don't have the right evidence or it is incoherent or blank. These are some examples of SCRs that I found these on the sample items on TEA's website. So these are examples of short constructed responses that they released. And so if you look at the pattern of how these are worded, excuse me, this should help you to write your own. So, for example, 3rd grade, what can you infer about why Snell's company calls big techs fried chicken? Support your answer with evidence from the article. That's 3rd grade. In lines 20 to 21, what is most likely the reason the poet uses imagery to describe the pants getting washed? What is one key idea found in paragraphs 3 and 4 of the article? I've seen this one a lot. The key idea of a section. Why are lines 27 to 34 important to the plot of the play? So notice that each question is only asking about a specific section or part of the passage. So that's what I've noticed with SCRs. Okay, and these are some more for the higher grades because I know some people follow me that are 6th to 8th grade, so I wanted to include these as well. And they follow this exact same pattern. They just have a little bit more complex language. So 6th grade, what is most likely the reason the poet rhymes the first and last lines of each stanza? In paragraph 3, why does the author include the detail of Gilbert talking to George about the horses? I kind of shortened that a little bit. What effect does Angie have on the resolution of the conflict? That's 7th grade. Explain how Anthony's behavior in paragraphs 12 through 14 affects the resolution of the plot. 8th grade. And that's the link where you can find these. And it also shows you on that same document, it'll show you all the new question types and examples of those. It doesn't have 5th grade for some reason, but I would look at the 6th grade and I would look at the 4th grade. Okay, so then how do you teach SCRs? So what I'd like to do is I started off with fiction. Fiction is a little bit easier for the students. So, and that just happened to be the curriculum in the district that I work in. So we started with fiction. I modeled an SCR. So we read the passage. I did the passage as a read aloud. We discussed the passage. I asked questions while we were reading the passage. And then we started off just doing the short constructed response orally, just like you would if you were doing a read aloud and you asked them a question. And they would answer, and I would have them restate an answer out loud. Or you could do think, pair, share. And then eventually I would get them to actually write it. But before I got them to write it, I would ask them to say it out loud and then write it, or say it to the person next to you and then write it. And that really helped. I would do it step by step, like first do the RA, say it, write it, get maybe a chocolate chip to reinforce that behavior if that's what you're trying to do. And then when they do the evidence, then they say it, they find it, they say it, and then they write it. And with those, I always put sentence starters on the board, just like you saw the planner. I always would write on the board, or I would keep repeating the text says. You can see how this student wrote the text states. So keep repeating those sentence starters just to help them. And then after I model it, like I was saying, we do it and we might do it orally, and then we might do it, like I said, writing it down. Then I would have the students do one in groups. So I like to I have 4 kids at each table. So I like to do each table group would write an SCR. I like to do it where each student has their own paper, but they're working, they're talking, they're listening, and they're collaborating and working on it together, but they all have to write it. And usually I do a reward once they finish it. Different groups are going to finish at different times, but I like to give them like a little chocolate chip or Jolly Rancher or something to kind of make them excited about it. After they've done it in a group, the next step would be that they do it completely by themselves. Now, if they cannot do that, that's when you have to basically help them by prompting them. So you're not giving them the answer, but you're saying to them, uh, what is the question? What are the question words? Underline those, highlight those. Now tell me, how are you going to restate that? Say it. And you're kind of talking them through it. And then they usually can do it with that scaffolding. And then maybe the next time they'll be able to do it completely on their own. So after I do fiction, I try to do that for a while, and then I would repeat the process for when you're introducing a new genre. When we started nonfiction, it surprised me that it was a lot harder to do the short constructed responses with nonfiction. So I had to go back to modeling. We did one together where they told me what to write and I scribed it. Then they did one in a group, and then they did it on their own. Um, and then I already talked about this underlining or highlighting the restate words in the question. That really helps a lot of students that have trouble, excuse me, have trouble spelling or just knowing how to write the word. They also should be highlighting the evidence before they copy it. At first, they can just quote it, but the end goal is for them to be able to paraphrase. I did notice that all the released samples were paraphrased mostly. So I think that's a higher level that I'm going to add some lessons. I'll share with you guys some paraphrasing lessons that I've done that have really worked, and I'll share those with you guys. Keep practicing the SCRs with read alouds throughout the whole year, and then I would start putting one per week in your stations or independent work. So you can either do that as an SCR as it alone, or you could add it to an assignment. Like let's say you have some questions that you're asking about a story, you could add an SCR to the end of it. You can make your own up. You can, sometimes there might be a multiple choice question that you can turn in to an SCR. You can do one on your social studies assignment. So there's different ways you can incorporate those. And I would encourage you to also get the science and math teachers to start adding those in too. Okay, so now that you've done SCRs, now it is time for ECRs. So the difference between an SCR and an ECR, basically an ECR is an extended constructed response, and that is going to be a question about the whole passage, not a section. It's going to have an introduction. It's going to have more text evidence. Could be, for example, 2 to 3 pieces of text evidence that you find throughout the article. You're going to explain the evidence. And this is probably the hardest part for students. They need to actually use their brain as if they are explaining it to another student who has not read the story. So they have to show you how this evidence proves their answer. why does it prove their answer? And there's some sentence starters you can use for those that I teach them, which is this shows, or I know, or this proves, or this means. So here would be an example of a planner. And notice I'm not using the sentence starters on the planner. I'm just putting down some notes. Later, I would put those into sentences. And then at the end, after they cite and explain, they need to sum it up, or you could call this the conclusion, where they answer the question again, but in a different way. So you don't want to put the exact same words that you have in the introduction. You want to teach them how to write a synonym or a word that means the same. And I have a lesson that's really good on word reference that teaches them how to do that. And I'll share that as well. So transitions is going to be huge. And I have a hands-on revising lesson where I cut out the transitions, and the transitions are all orange. So when they put the essay together like a puzzle, they can really see how the transition words make the writing flow. And I even included sentence starters as transitions, but also words like first of all, next, or finally. Words like that are also transitions. Word choice is going to be very important going through when they revise and getting rid of any words that repeat or any words that are vague, and teaching them how to revise and edit. I do have a checklist that I use. It's in, I think it's in a few of my products, but I think it's in the fiction one, and I'll share that with you. But the checklist is like a student-friendly version of the rubric that they can kind of go through and check off if they've done those things. And it could also be used to conference with them and check off what they need to go back and work on after you've kind of shown them and talked to them. Okay, these are some examples of ECRs that TEA released. And these came from that same document, which is called the item samplers. They all kind of follow this format. So this is the format that I'm using. It'll start with read the passage, and then it'll have the question, which does not have a question mark, by the way. It usually starts off with the word explain. So explain how the information in this article is organized and how this helps the reader to better understand how ice cream has changed over time. And then it'll tell them to write an informational essay, and it'll have all the bullet points. And I tell them that this is exactly what's in the rubric. And then it'll tell them to go back and revise and edit. So if they see something like this on the STAAR test or on any test, this means that they are writing an essay. So they can highlight these words. In Eduphoria, they can highlight these words on the STAAR test, and that will help them write their first sentence or their introduction. So some examples of ECRs. Third grade had explain the relationship between the poet and the pants and how this relationship is developed by the poet. So notice it is almost like, it really goes deep and is talking about how it's developed. So when I create questions, I try to kind of follow this format. Explain how Herbie's behavior changes and how this is developed by the playwright. So that's definitely a word that we need to teach, that they know the playwright, the author, the poet, those all mean the same thing. That one was for fourth grade. So character changes, a relationship between things. Both paintings, this was sixth grade. They didn't have one, like I said, for fifth grade. Sixth grade could possibly be a double passage. I don't think that is the case for third or fourth or fifth, but don't quote me on that. Both paintings were left incomplete and both are widely known today. Explain how the painting and the novel are different in their journeys from unfinished projects to popular and important works. So that was 6th grade. 7th grade, explain how the friendship between Angie and Pete contributes to the development of the theme in the play. 8th grade, explain how Anthony's interactions with Grandpa help to develop a theme about how sharing experiences may lead to greater understanding between people. And I have seen the word theme, and I've also seen the word author's message. And this one I found in the scoring guide. So this just came out in October. And the only thing they put out, the TA put out, was one for 3rd to 5th grade, which is opinion writing or argumentative. And the one sample for 6th grade, 6th to 8th grade, is informational. So most of what I'm talking about in this video is going to be informational. Later, I'll make another video about how to teach opinion writing, because there is a chance that it's either going to be informational or it's going to be argumentative. So the one for informational, the only student samples we have at the moment are 6th grade. So if you go to this link, or if you just search for score, I think it's called scoring guides. Yeah, scoring guide. You should be able to find it. Anyway, the prompt was explain how the author develops the idea in the article that it is not easy to become a NASA astronaut. So when you go through this, it's a very long document, and it's going to show you how students that got a 10 and it'll show you from 0 to 10 their essays and why they got that score, and it'll explain the rationale for those scores. Keep in mind it's 6th grade, but still you can get a lot of information from that. And then the opinion one, it was a double passage. Was it a double passage? Yes, I think it was a double passage. This one was 5th grade, and I can't remember. But anyway, it says steamboats and clippers were popular forms of transportation in the United States in the 1800s. Explain whether you think the steamboat or the clipper ship changed life in the United States more. I think it was just one article that kind of talked about both of the boats. And then they have to choose which boat is the one that that they have the most evidence for being the one that changed life in the US more. So anyway, you can look at those and see what real students actually wrote. This one is 5th grade. They don't have one for 3rd and 4th, and they don't have one for 7th and 8th. So they just gave like a range. So anyway, this is the rubric that TA is using. So it has 0 to 3, idea development, 0 to 2, conventions. So if you add the 3 plus the 2, that would equal 5. And then 2 people grade it. And so that could be a total possible score of 10. If you look closely at the rubric, it basically says to get a 10 or to get a 5 doubled, they have to have a controlling idea that is clear and fully developed. They have to have organization that is effective. Evidence is specific, well-chosen, and relevant. Expression of ideas is clear and effective. Student writing demonstrates consistent command of grade level appropriate conventions, including correct sentence construction, punctuation, capitalization, grammar usage, and spelling. Okay, so I would recommend starting with fiction first. This is an example of a fiction one that I have in my resources that is based on the story Winn-Dixie, which is actually a book, and it was also on the STAAR test a few years ago. So I chose to do that one, and I just did like theme, author's message. I like to do the colors just to show that show the students the different parts of the essay. So I recommend that first when you model this example, and I think this is the one that I started with, and I modeled this for my students. When you model this, you can either I think what I did is I gave them all black and white copy, and then I had them figure out and underline what was red, and that would be the RA. If they found text evidence, that was blue, and then the RA at the end, which is the S. And then it was like, well, what's left? That's the green, that's the explain. And so we did that at the beginning. We modeled it, modeled the structure, read the story together. Then another thing I like to do is, you're going to repeat this pattern of model, doing a shared ECR where you ask the students for input and you type it. You do the planner together, you type the final copy together, you revise it together. Then they do one in a group, and then they do one alone. But when they do it alone, don't expect them to be completely on their own. You're still going to have to conference. What I did is I conferenced after each part of the planner. So they did their RA, they checked in with me. If it was wrong, I had them go back and fix it. Then they did their CE, and then I checked it. And so I checked each part of the planner before they even got to the final copy. After they did their final copy, I conferenced with them. They brought their computer to me, and we talked about things like run-ons and fragments. And you're going to have to really teach them how to, do capitals with the shift and how to put a space after a period. And so I found that conferencing is the best way to teach that. So I also do another thing where I have these 4 squares, and I've shared this resource. I have a 4 square for fiction, a 4 square for nonfiction, and one for poetry. And I'll probably make one for drama. So this one is a 4 square for fiction. So basically, they would use this when they are about to read a passage. And the top left box is kind of like their preview strategies. And then it gets into the story. So I have characters, setting, the author's message or the lesson, inferences over here, and then the problem and the solution, if there is one, or the main events of the story is what they should be kind of jotting about. And I teach them to not write a whole sentence, just write a few words, 3 or 4 words. So if they do this, they're going to really understand the story before they even start the ECR. And they're also going to do all the comprehension questions first, because then they're going to understand the story, so they do the 4 square first, then the questions, then the ECR. And then they would do a planner, and then they would type their final copy. So, and then I would repeat that process by starting with the SCRs for fiction, and then ECR for fiction. And then I would move nonfiction, SCRs, and then ECRs. Okay, teaching tips. Learn with your students. Allow oral response first. Text evidence is key. Provide sentence starters on an anchor chart and also on your planners that you're giving students. Give them the planner at first, but then later you can teach them how to draw it themselves on a piece of lined paper or blank paper. The more hands-on experiences, the better. Feedback and conferencing are key. You have to do a lot of conferencing and a lot of feedback constantly. Remember that your energy drives the lessons. So the more excited about it, the kids are going to be more on board. If you make it fun, if you, have competitions or do candy and have them get really excited about it. Another thing, these are other tips that have worked for me, is to treat the students like celebrities. Share out their writing. Once it gets to a point where it's looking really good, share it. Put their SCRs and ECRs on the smart board or under the document camera so students can learn great writing techniques from each other. Celebrate and clap for each student, pair, or table group. Display essays around the room and let students show off essays to another teacher. And I talked a little bit about this, giving them a chocolate chip, a little marshmallow, a school buck, or whatever, when they finish a tiny little step that you're trying to reinforce. So if getting them to write the RA is like pulling teeth and they're just all sitting there, then try giving them a chocolate chip if they write the RA, and you will be amazed how you suddenly have a classroom full of writers. And then obviously once they get the chocolate chip, next time they might not need the treat and they'll still be able to do it and they'll have that confidence that they did it. So you could even say each part of the process you get a chocolate chip or something, any skill that you're trying to reinforce. And last but not least, these are some links that you can use if you want more information. This is my YouTube channel. It's basically youtube.com at Teaching RLA with Carlin Liborio. I'm going to be posting more videos on there for you to watch to help you guys. Hope this video helped. Facebook, please follow me on my Facebook page. It has the same name. And I post resources, new resources. I post things that I'm doing in my classroom. And then I also have a teacher pay teacher store where I'm putting resources that are already created that will hopefully help you. They already have sample essays, the 4 squares, the planners, all the things that you might find helpful when you're teaching this. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please subscribe, like, all the things. Thank you so much for watching this long video, and I hope it helped.